Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you are. I hope you are all doing well today. It's another kind of gray day, but hey, we're here. We're going to learn some music. I've got a cool topic for you, and also we are in celebration of a really exciting thing. Today is the release day of PX3's latest record, Left Hand. Recorded so generously by Cody Urban, mixed and mastered by Mackenzie Christensen. If you have an opportunity to go on Spotify or any of your streaming services, make it your soundtrack for today. We're really proud of this record. It's was done all in one take live, no overdubs, no edits, kind of keeping in the spirit of the duo's approach. Everything was done improvised, so we hope you enjoy it. It's a short record, so put it on repeat and spin it. We also potentially have another one that we're going to try to release in the midst of this craziness to keep y'all entertained. But piggybacking on what this record has is a lot of usage of the beginnings of what we call outside harmony. So what is outside harmony? Outside harmony can mean a few different things. It can really address the idea of, quote-unquote, playing literally outside of your chords. So if you are dealing with, a C chord or something like that, or an F chord, and then starting to play the notes that are technically not within the chord's harmonic structure. However, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a fun trick for substituting major over minor. Sometimes we call these 3-1 and 7-1 subs, and I'll go over what all that means. So a 3-1 sub would sound like this, and a 7-1 sub would sound like this. Right, so you're starting to play on top of the chord changes rather than playing within the fixed harmony. So, before we start, if you notice in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, donations are greatly appreciated and accepted. We are trying to make the best of the situation, so if you have anything that you want to throw our way to say thanks, that's super, super appreciated. We love it. Stream the PX3 album, and let's begin our discussion. So, what is outside harmony, right? So outside harmony, a lot of the time when people think about outside harmony, they think about like a chord being played, right? And people are just going way out, right? We'll get into motions like that I just played right there, probably in the second or third part of this discussion, but we need to start back a few steps to understand how to build what we call upper partials or extensions, right, on a chord. So let me explain what an extension is, so that way we can get into what this 3-1 and 7-1 substitutions are. So let's think about a chord. Let's start in D minor. So for those of you who are on piano, it's all the white keys. It's fantastic. On guitar, I'm not really sure. Your hands probably go like this in some shape, right? So when you're doing a chord, we think of 1 as D, 3, F, 5, C, 7. I'm sorry. 1 is D, 3 is F, 5 is A, my apologies, 7 is C, and then we can keep going, where 9 is E, 11 is G, and 13 is B. Now, if you were to kind of take that, right, you have this whole sound. Really thick, beautiful chord, big extended chord. Now, the really cool thing is, right, if you can see my hands well enough, right, is we take this shape, D, F, A, C, and then we have E, G, B. You take the E, G, B, and you can just bring it back down. You're literally playing all 7 notes of your scale simultaneously. So when someone says, that note doesn't really fit, that is true on the aesthetic side, but the mathematics side and the numeric side, every note fits everywhere. That's a really cool truth to the way a lot of harmony works, is that every note's fair game. I took this incredible masterclass with Chick Corea a couple of years back, and something that I'm going to tap into, and like I said, in the second and third part, dealing with like chordal voicings, what McCoy Tyner used to do. But the idea is that every note's fair game. It's all about the energy behind the note, not necessarily the actual pitch. Now, obviously, aesthetics are a huge part. You don't want to be playing a tritone. Remember, tritones were a couple days ago. You don't want to be you could justify that, I guess. If you hit it again really loudly and really confidently, then it's the correct note. But we're going to deal with something that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing today with our first outside harmony. So what you're going to notice by the end of this little discussion is that the idea of playing out is surprisingly playing in. So hopefully I can try to explain how it's a matter of perspective shift. So while we can think about playing outside the harmony, as being ancillary notes that aren't necessarily directly related to the chord structure that we're dealing with, we can also show how they are directly related back to the chord at hand. So, tying back in everything with this idea of digital harmony, right? So we had 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13, right? And again, I'm dealing with D minor, so this would be a D minor 9, 11, 13 chord. So you have D, F, A, C, E, G, B. Cool, right? Okay. Now, let's talk about how do we take this. And again, the first idea of superimposing this major over minor is the initial stages of playing, quote-unquote, out, right? So, when we think about the motion, right, we have to remember that we can label our notes in our chord as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 1, okay? And in doing so, what we end up having is the ability to then change where our ear is recognizing the root, home base. So in this case, D is your home base, right? But what if we shifted our perspective? And this is where we start to be able to superimpose a major sound over minor. But then if you take a step back and look at the chord as a whole, you're actually not affecting the chord at all. This is what this 3-1 and eventually in a moment the 7-1 substitution reveal. So let's begin. We have a D minor chord, D, F, A, C, okay? Now, what is a 3-1 substitution? Well, let's think about D is 1, right? D is our root. So what's going to be the third of D? So if D is 1, D, then E, then F. F is 3, okay? Now, check it out. If you reference your circle of fourths, and again, I'm going to try to get into this. I'm going to take the weekend off because, you know, we'll resume these on Monday, and I'll try to bring up a nice visual like I did with the left hand of a circle of fourths. So that way you can at least have like a screenshot to understand this. So again, this will all kind of tie in together starting next week as far as like the broader sense of how to build your harmony. So when you're dealing with a 3-1 substitution, right, 1, 3, 5, 7, and your third is F, okay? So check this out. The key of F major has a B flat in it. So your scale is F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. Okay? Now, what if I arpeggiated that chord, okay? So if I went 1, 3, 5, 7. Right? There are no two questions about it. That's an F major 7 chord, right? It's nice and bright, very happy, okay? But what if I shifted our perspective? What if I kept it in the key of D, okay? So keeping in the key of D, what I mean by that, right, is that we have your D minor, and then if I bring F, A, C, E, right? All you're doing is if you're thinking in reference to your D minor, you're just playing 3, 5, 7, and 9, right? You're literally just removing the root. Remember, we're talking about rootless voicings, right? This is another way of thinking about rootless voicings. So another way of bringing that, okay, is you have 1, 3, 5, 7, and then 3, 5, 7, 9. But how do you make that sound out? Because right now you're just like, dude, you're just playing an extension. You're not actually playing quote-unquote out. Right, but that's what I'm saying. Out is not really out. It's actually in, at least in the beginning stages. The idea is perspective shift of your arpeggiation, okay? So the first step is to recognize that what makes your ear think something's out is a little bit of dissonance. So dissonance versus consonance, right? Dissonance, not very pleasant sounding, where consonance, a little bit more pleasant sounding. To get a little bit more mathematical with you, right? Check this out. There's only 3 consonant intervals technically in music. The 4th, the 5th, and the octave, right? You could say, well, a third, 1, 2, 3, sounds really nice. Yes, it does, but if you look at an oscilloscope and the way the waves go, the waves actually beat against each other. So technically, by the rules of physics, this is considered a dissonant interval, even though it's very aesthetically pleasing. But what we're dealing with is, right, I said, to make it sound out is the idea of tension, right, dissonance, right? So if I bring this, if I have the root here and I ninth, right, it has a nice sound, but it's obviously there's a little bit of a rub, right? There's a little bit of grit. So what you can do is you can start your origin of this third, right, starting on the third, your F, right, but start it on the E, right? So if you have to kind of think in duality here, you can either think of this as repositioning and repurposing a D minor 9 chord, or you can think of it as an F major 7 chord. So for the sake of thinking in the direct relationship of substitution, let's think of it as F major 7. So if it's F major 7, I'm just inverting it, right? So to invert something, you just change the notes. I think of it as like musical Jenga, right? You take the block from the bottom and bring it to the top. So you have like F, A, C, E, A, C, E, F, right? Remove the F and brought it to the top. You're going to remove the A and bring it to the top. C, E, F, A. Remove the C, bring it to the top, E, F, A, C. And this is the shape we're going to explore, which is the third inversion of a 7th chord, okay? So if I have this shape, your D minor chord in my left hand, if I start on the 7 of the 3rd chord, right, which is the E, right, all of a sudden you're playing on top of the changes, right? Now this, you can argue like, that's not really out, man. No, it's not. Again, this is the foundations of playing out. This is how we get further out. This is like dipping your toe into the water and slowly opening that door into the realm of entropy, right? So you have to keep controlled first before you start going way like, right, way out like that. I'll get into that at a later time, right? So again, check this out. 1, 3, 5, 7, but then we're taking your 3rd chord and you're substituting over the 1. So what ends up happening here, okay, is that your ear now hears E as your new root. So another way to think about it, okay, is if you're thinking in non-scalar shape, right? If you're thinking in, non-chord shape, if you start thinking scalar, right, linear shape, this is where things can get really cool. So you can take your E and play your D minor scale, which is Dorian minor, okay? So Dorian minor, and again, I'm going to get into this probably on Monday, modality, right? It's a borrowing system. So we always use mode number 2 for minor. So that means that D is the 2nd note above the scale in which it borrows from. So if D is 2, 2, 1. Remember, guys, inclusive counting, okay? So you want to make sure that you have D to C, right? So you think about that, borrows from the key of C, and we love the key of C because there's no sharps and no flats, okay? But what if I took that exact same scale, right, the D minor scale, or technically the C major scale? So instead of thinking of a duality, we're thinking like a 3-ality, right? You're going to think of like 3 things at once, right? You will take the E and play, right? Which, if you're looking at modality, that's an E Phrygian, okay? So Phrygian's mode number 3, which means E is the 3rd note above C major, okay? So you can literally play Phrygian over minor starting on the 9 or starting on, quote-unquote, the 7th of the 3 chord. This is a lot of numbers to throw at you, so let me just recap that quickly so that way you're not feeling overwhelmed with a lot of numbers, right? There's 2 perspectives. You can either think of your substitution as a new chord, in this case the 3 chord off D minor, which is F major 7, and then starting your scale on its respective 7th, right, F, A, C, E, or you can think of it all native to the key of D minor, which would be starting on the 9, which is E. So check this out. This sound is pretty hip. So let me, I'm going to do the chord in my left hand on the Rhodes, and then I'll do it on the organ so you have a slight, like, tonal difference, right? Right? That's how I get a lot of those cool, like, floating lines, okay? So in doing so, you have that opportunity to be playing, like, kind of on top of the chords. You're playing a lot of the partials because you're playing the 9 and you're playing the 13 a lot. So for soloing purposes, this is really cool because if the band is just vamping on a chord, and again, this works specifically with minor. We can't do extensions on major, and we'll get into that later. But if a band's just vamping on a chord, this is a great way to really start expanding out and building more tension, okay? So you have, again, your D minor, and you're essentially playing E Phrygian, okay? We can do the same exact thing on the 7 chord, okay? So check it out, right? What's the 7th of D minor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. C, all right? So here's the other thing, right? So this is all gonna relate numerically in a really cool way, all right? So same principle, right? We say, okay, cool, we're gonna now make our new quote-unquote root off the 7th, right? And go 1, 3, 5, 7, right? Which is a C major chord. Check that out. And guys, if you remember from a few seconds ago, what does D minor borrow from? C major, right? It's all intrinsically related, like I said, and I'll keep reiterating it. Playing out is not playing out. It's just repurposing perspective, okay? So the idea is that, like, imagine you took, like, a piece of paper and you held it and you folded it up. It's still the same piece of paper, it just looks different, right? It's the same DNA, but we're just repurposing it and moving around as molecules or whatever, right? That's all you're doing when you're reharmonizing on the initial level before we start doing sequencing and sidestepping and beyond, okay? So when you look at your D minor and we say, all right, now I'm going to do a 7-1 substitution, right? We just did 3-1, meaning we replaced for your ear the root with the 3rd, so 3-1. Okay, now we're going to do 7-1, replacing your quote-unquote root with the 7th, which is the note C. Okay, so in doing so, you now have a C major chord over that, so you get this cool chord, right? Really pretty, right? Now, if you remember from the beginning of the lesson, we go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. You're literally just playing a D minor scale in its entirety, all 7 notes just spaced out in a really pretty way. So you can do the same pattern. Remember, we did on the 3, we started on the 7th of the 3, and we do the same thing with the 7 chord. So I'll do the chord here and the scale here. right? That's a little bit more out than the 3-1 substitution. That's a cool thing. I actually like to use this one a little bit more, especially in really moments of, if you're getting like really trippy and really out there, and kind of like if some of you jam band heads like a type 2 jam, right? This is a great way to start really taking what your ear is thinking is home base and move it way out. And it's quite cool, because what ends up happening is you start bringing in all these color tones that are still symbiotic to the chord you're playing, but your ears recognize them as playing like much more outside the box, okay? So it's the same principle now too, right? So we have this 7 chord, right? Okay? Or you can do scale, right? So check this out. If I do the same thing where I'm taking starting on the B and using the same notes as your D minor, which in this case, remember guys, no sharps and no flats, right? You end up playing this. And again, to get back to modality, which I promise, like, the more and more I'm doing this, I'm realizing Monday is going to be a class of modality. It'll be great. It's one of my favorite things to show you guys. This, starting on B, with no sharps, no flats, is a B Locrian scale, the 7th mode of major, which is also known as half diminished or minor 7 flat 5, depending on how you like to conceptualize it. So you're taking two ancillary modes, right? You're either, when a 3-1 sub, you're taking Phrygian, or you're taking Lydian, right? Locrian, my apologies. Locrian, mode number 7. Okay? And by doing that, you can sit there and start playing much more outside the box. The trick is to do this with every single key. My suggestion is you go up chromatically. It's a really good practicing. So you start on the D, right? So you go like... Then you do the scale. Okay, right? So let's do a different one. It's like we said chromatically, right? So you can do E flat, right? Okay, E flat minor, so that'd be E flat, G flat, B flat, D flat. And then the way you think about it, the 9, or the 7th of the 3 chords in F. Right, and again, these are all major chords that you're superimposing. This is where you get the major over minor sound, or you can... Right, or you can do it off the 7, in this case, which is what? It's your D flat. That was a little sloppy, sorry about that, but you get the idea. Right, so you get the idea. So by moving it around chromatically, you get to explore all 12 keys. And again, don't stigmatize keys. It's really easy to say, man, I don't want to do F sharp. It's not that bad, especially if you're on piano. Unfortunately, piano has an advantage because it's all very visual. Guitar is a lot of pattern-based, but doing this on like wind instruments, it's a little bit more inherently challenging. And I do recommend, taking your time with it and not, feeling like one key has precedent over the other. Because again, try to bring in as many keys as you can. So that should do it for today. That's your first wave of doing outside playing. So just to really briefly recap before we part ways for this gray day, we're going to be dealing with the 3-1 substitution. So 3-1 starting with your 3rd, or 7-1 substitution starting with your 7th off the minor. Okay. If you have any questions, please do reach out. Again, if you see at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there, donations are always welcome and accepted. We're all in this together. Any little bit counts. Not to pander for money, but this is what I do for a living. I teach and I tour, and I've lost all my tours. Speaking of tours, Rob and I were supposed to go out on the road starting tonight, to support this new record. If you haven't yet already, please do take the time to follow PX3 and know mine, my 2 respective bands. And make sure you check out Looking at Left Hand, which is the debut studio album for PX3. And the debut studio album was recorded in the same situation that we do live, where everything was done with no editing, no overdubs, nothing. Everything was done improvised. So if you get a chance, it's on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Napster, because Napster's a thing now, iHeartRadio, whatever your streaming service you choose. If you like what you hear and you want some private lessons, I do offer private lessons. We got plenty of free time. So please do not make yourself a stranger. I want to thank you guys again for tuning in. It's so great seeing people dig what's going on here, and everyone who is taking the time to reach out and ask questions or set up some lessons. Some of you have already set up lessons with me, which is great. Again, the offer is always on the table. Please do not make yourself a stranger. We'll make sure that I get back to this on Monday, where we'll talk about modality, circle of fourths, and beyond, to make sure that we can tie together some of these broad concepts. Thank you again, guys. I hope you all have a good day. It's the weekend. although every day kind of feels like the weekend at this rate. Spent a whole day teaching yesterday, have a couple students later today. So you all have a wonderful afternoon, and I will see you on Monday.